Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizarro. I'm your host. That's Bizarro. For anyone who's out there, you can find us on Instagram at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs or at Justin Bizarro. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you grow yourself through podcasts. Yes, it's been a totally crazy experience. I appreciate the audience. A lot of people have told me. I know I went from Google Podcasts to YouTube Podcasts. All the links and everything got screwed up, and so we're still working on moving properly onto YouTube Podcasts again and syndicating on there. It has to do with our artwork, and interestingly, the photo of me biting the apple is not, the sizes aren't matching up properly for the standards of YouTube. So that's what's causing all the issues. We've been trying to fix it and trying to fix the photo and trying to fix the album cover, not getting very far. So it may mean a new album cover, sadly, but maybe that'll have to be done. So with that being said, thank you guys. I appreciate you guys letting me know it wasn't on YouTube podcast right now. And so we were losing some of our fan base there that did use that as an avenue, quite a large one, actually. About 24% of our fan base or our listeners come from Google Podcasts. So I appreciate you guys letting us know. With that being said, I have a guest with us. I actually sat next to him every day for about 13 weeks, I believe it was, maybe more. It was about 13 weeks during my time at Denver Seminary. It was a leadership class, wasn't it? That's the class we had together. And
theological and theoretical foundations of leadership.
Yeah, there you go. And every day, no joke. It was so crazy. I forgot what schooling was like since I hadn't been to school since 2014. But the discipline, the regiment, the how everyone sits in the same seats all the time by nature, because we've been trained that way. It was an interesting experience.
Yeah,
from that perspective. But no, I enjoyed it very much. We'll continue it at some point as I rebalance out my life and figure out things moving forward and bring this podcast thing back into my life and try to release an episode every other day or 200 episodes this year. But one of the things I will say that I like in the pursuit of doing it and why I feel the need to finish it no matter what, you're one of my inspirations in that just take your time, do what needs to be done, reflect, learn, and then continue to grow, do the right thing. I think that's important. But I think that seminary is such an incredible experience. So let's go back. Arik, let's just talk about who you are, where your background is, what sort of brought you into the spiritual world and being a representative of that for us humans in the secular world in some ways, like being a theological translator for us, because I will tell you, we'll talk a little bit about that, what seminary taught me about theology and about those who are equipped with it and those of us who need to be equipped by those with it. So there's a difference. Those who are being equipped properly and those who are equipping us with it. And so Arik, the floor is yours. Tell me a little bit about you. Take as long as you want, but talk about background, life decisions, and sort of your pursuit of your path with Jesus.
Yeah, will do. Let me just first say, Justin, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this, and I've never done this before, so I'll do my best. But yeah, so I grew up in the Denver metro area, and I still live in the Denver metro area. And one of the main things I think we'll get to, apart from seminary, is the fact that I am soon transitioning with my wife and my two little girls to be a missionary in Budapest in Hungary. And so that's going to be a major transition for me because I've been in Denver my whole life, apart from studying abroad when I was in college. But I grew up in Parker, which is in southeast Denver, and then went more downtown for school. I did international business at the University of Denver, which my understanding is you got a BA in international business in your undergrad. Is that right?
Yeah, I did BA in international business and business management. So two things, but yeah, I did in international business and management for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a little bit of a similar background there. But while I was in college, I got really involved in Cru, which is formerly Campus Crusade for Christ. And I was asked to be the student president of that organization and really managing just about everything about it with my best friend, Tim. And it was during that time that I realized that I just liked vocational ministry more than anything else because I was a resident assistant in college and I was doing business school and all of that. But what I really love doing is organizing weekly gatherings for a Christian fellowship and small groups and one-on-one discipleship. And so that led me to reach out to my church that I had grown up in actually since 2003, reach out to them and say, hey, do you know of anybody that needs an intern in ministry? I would love to find out if that's a viable vocation for me moving forward. And they said, well, actually, yesterday our youth pastor resigned and you were the first name that came up as someone we should reach out to. And so it really felt like God's timing of they suddenly had a need and I had an inquiry all within like 24 hours. And so while I was finishing college, I started as a youth pastor and then I developed from a part-time role to a full-time role and eventually became an executive pastor with a ministry license and all of that. And for a couple of years, I was doing that and going, this is great. I've been given more opportunity than I'd be given just about anywhere because this is my home church. And yet I don't feel qualified to do this. I'm right out of college and I have this title of pastor. And so at that point, I decided I think I should probably go to seminary to prepare for a career in ministry, whether I'm a pastor or something else. And it was actually shortly after I decided to go to seminary that my wife and I, Leah is her name, she and I had gone on a spiritual discernment retreat and just thought and prayed about our future. And my path was kind of redirected again when we felt God calling us to go serve as missionaries internationally. And over time, that developed from just generally internationally to Europe, and then within Europe to go and serve in Hungary. And so my career trajectory, if you will, so far has been starting in the international business educational track, and then shifting to local church ministry as a pastor, and then once again shifting to international ministry as a missionary. And so that's kind of the direction that I've gone thus far.
Yeah, I love it. I want to talk about a couple of things. One is, let's talk about rebellion a little bit in the way we look at it from a societal point of view. I think a lot of people think they're rebellion, but actually in our rebellion, we're just doing what every human does, which is rebel against the norm or what we think is the norm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you're in college and you're forming groups to study and pursue Jesus, what everyone doesn't understand is that's actually the rebellion.
Mm. Yeah. In my college environment, the University of Denver is a very secular college. And it was originally called Colorado Seminary, which is crazy because of how different it is from like Denver Seminary now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very abnormal thing to be a Christian on that campus. And when I graduated in 2016, started in 2012, and within that window, our estimation was there were probably only 200 Christians at this school of about 11,000 undergraduate and graduate students. And so very much a minority and kind of, I guess, using your language, rebelling against what the norm was in that context.
And I don't want to use it in the terms of human rebellion against God. Those are two different things. But what I'm talking about when we think about it as humans, the real rebellion is us pushing back against what all the temptation of life is, all the sinful behavior, and choosing a different path. It sounds crazy, and I know everyone's like, whatever, and I don't want to go that way. It's because it seems scary and it seems hard to live a good life because it takes work. But it also takes a lot of work to live a sinful life and keep up with a sinful life. A lot of work.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so you're spending the same amount of energy, just one's building a life, one's destroying it. and building lives around you and one's destroying lives around you, whether we realize it or not. And I think that that's, sort of the conversation there, just to talk about the importance of understanding when we think we're rebelling or we're these young rebellious kids or entrepreneurs or business people. Often, a lot of the times, we're just doing what everyone else is doing. It's not a rebellious or it's not an independent thing. What we're doing is what everyone else does. And if we want independence, it's weirdly being more like Christ. And so that's the thing that I think there's irony there, but it's also a theological understanding that bends the mind in ways that I don't think all humans are meant to process. And I think that that's why there's theological schools to process the complications and be able to explain the ways for people that don't think theologically or have the theological depth to understand. The other thing is that really became clear to me is the different avenues of Christianity. For me, they're just different tools that God uses. We're all going Christian, but the important part is why within each one of them that have significant foundation and the ability to stand up through time is there's a coercive thought training from, the beginning of Genesis all the way to the crucifixion of Christ. There's a continued thing that makes sense theologically that balances out transfiguration, resurrection, rebellion, all of these type of things. So that whole thing on a level that, yes, each of us have a personal relationship with God. Yes, we are to grow that. Yes, we are to spend time with Him. But the deep theology, the real deep stuff that's on a much deeper level than just our relationship, or on a level that requires us maybe to get guidance to grow, to be better, or how to translate our lives into more spiritual life. Yeah, there has to be the importance of a spiritual leader, religious leader, pastor, counselor, the avenues that this looks like. Denver Seminary trains all of them in this fashion with Christian values, Christian biblical support. I mean, I think that's the other thing, is the ability to take the word of the Bible and not only understand it right now, how it applies now, but how it was written and what the historical contexts are through all of the books of the Bible. That was just mind blowing in some of the context when you think about that. When Jesus came around, we lived in a different world. It was eye for an eye. Our understanding of human rights and who we are and our power and our individuality and the value of a human life was not what it is now. It didn't gain value really until he died for all of us. And that's part of that dying for the sin thing, is our lives were worthless until they became worth something. In some ways. And so, to put it in very plain terms, but even that, it's more complicated than that in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, it's also that simple. We try to overthink it in a lot of ways, and it's really just that relationship.
One,
I'm
gonna backtrack a little bit on something you said that's really interesting. Yeah, my first semester of seminary, one of the things I learned is that everyone is a theologian, because what theology is discussion about God. And everyone who has any mental capacity is able to make comments about God and the nature of the cosmos and things like that. But there's a gradation or a scale where at the highest level, you have professional theologians who are PhDs and doctorates of ministry, often professors or textbook writers, who live in this just very esoteric world where they understand such deep realities about the Bible and about theology that it cannot be translated very well to the just layperson who doesn't have the degree of education and experience that they have. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have just the average churchgoer who is seeking to live a godly life and learn more about the Bible and know what is true. And my understanding is that there's kind of a middle ground there where those who go to seminary and those who are professional ministers, one of their primary roles is being the mediator between those two ends, where you can apprehend what these professors and PhDs are trying to say, and you can translate it and make it digestible for the average person who's just trying to grow in their faith and their understanding of God. So does that make sense? The kind of three levels of theology that I'm trying to explain here.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we do understand that we all have a level or a capacity for it, because that's the way I view it. And even that, like, three classes my first semester, like, was too much for me, because I hadn't, while Catholic school, always being religious, always reflecting on the Bible, going that direction. When you go into that theological study, the capacity changes. Like, what you're doing is, it's almost like I'm exercising a muscle, and the muscle needs to expand. So does every human have the capability of do it? Yes. Are some of us better at taking that amount of information and digesting it, or reading it and turning it into something professional? Yes. Because paper writing and stuff like that's all on a whole new level. But I think what we're talking about is growing a capacity like a muscle, and in that capacity comes different levels. Does God give us different gifts? For sure. But I think that it's also that it's the ability to have the capacity to do it. And what we're talking about in theologians is they're dedicating their full time and capacity to be that whatever, that conduit, that transfer of information. So
yeah, that's right. And I think that there's a select group of people that can be professional theologians. You have to have a great mental capacity for that. But in my opinion, I think most people would be capable of doing seminary. The greatest challenge of seminary is not, do you have the intellectual capacity? It's, do you have the time and energy? Because it is just so much reading and so much paper writing. It took me 6 years at a half-time pace, so I understand that full well.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I've learned, and we had the leadership class together, is there's a dynamic of, in the way we look at the world and leadership now, there's at least in the Western world, there's an underlying view of leadership that we use the word for, that has now a Christian sort of value system attached to it, that we want our leaders to be these upscale individuals. But if you went back to the times of the Bible or the Old Testament, leadership was a bad word. They weren't looked at as great people. They were looked at people that took advantage, that abused the individuals, whatever. So one of the things that I like in particular, that I think that we have a particular understanding and need to understand Jesus' impact, not only religiously or saving our souls, is the way it started to save our livelihood in the world itself through things that he did. There are correlations to things that have happened throughout. 313 AD and Constantine took a while, but it slowly started integrating where, okay, the emperor's not the king. Jesus is the king. The emperor is merely another human that's running a kingdom or an empire at that time.
Sure.
So I think there's these transitions that have helped, that have empowered the individual in ways that we have never imagined. I think we forget about that. What we forget to look at what it's accomplished. Those who have had the capacity to focus on it, what they've done since Jesus' death. Like, there's all these people have carried this weight, to carry this message, to keep it going in a world that often wants to take this simple way out and squash it.
Yeah.
And seminary was like, okay, we got a strong group of warriors here. They may not know they're warriors, but their life and their battle with the devil and with evil is seriously going to be an ongoing thing if they seriously pursue saving souls in the way that they're being armed to do in seminary. It's not a joke, guys. Like, one of the things I learned about seminary from my perspective as a business person, as someone who's played chess or competitive games in business all over the world internationally, and in things like, seminary is preparing you for a spiritual game, a spiritual warfare game, to help us as humans, to prepare individuals to help us theologically as humans find the answers we need so we can better protect ourselves from bad behavior. I'm not, the devil doesn't show up in horns and a pitchfork and stab us with a pitchfork. That's not the way it works.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, no kidding, right? And the PTSD would be whatever, but it's very disguised. Go ahead.
Yeah, my pastor, his name's Michael Miller. He's at Reclamation Church here in Denver. One of the things he said on Sunday, his last sermon, he said, the best way to arm yourself against lies is to thoroughly know the truth. And so that is a blessing that seminarians get to experience, is just spending, I think I calculated the other day that I spent somewhere around like 4,000 to 5,000 hours of work to get my Master's of Divinity at the seminary. But you think about just how much time that is dwelling on truth and getting it just thoroughly embedded in your consciousness. That really helps you combat lies. How do you combat lies? It's with the truth. And another thing I was thinking, just you acknowledging the importance of a seminary education and how that kind of trickles down to the rest of the community and the people that seminary grads interact with. I remember my first semester, I highlighted and underlined just about every part of every book I read, because I was just going, wow, this is all important. This is life and death. This is eternity. This is the reason that the universe exists. And I just found myself just captivated by just about everything I was reading, because I was going, this is all so important for people and for the world. Because if this is true, this changes everything. So I agree. It's important, and it's a very necessary part of Christian community for people to get thoroughly educated about it.
Yeah. And I'm a hyper functional, super intelligent human. Like, I'm not going to pretend I'm not, and I've worked very hard to be or whatever, but seminary, it's a whole level of being able to process things. I respect it a lot, the intellect. It's a different type. It's something I'm working on for sure. But your
it's
degree,
not quite the same as the business
it's not for the faint of heart.
World, is it?
No, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is, and I'm going to say problem, because this is the way most of the world views it, whether they realize it or not, is when you go into seminary, and a lot of people that choose seminary, humans, have started to prepare their life for seminary, or prepare their life for God slowly prepares us, okay? It's rarely that life goes in there and there's abrupt changes, but it happens. I've met a lot of also individuals that sort of have done what I did, go in. What happens, and I'm going to say this, is when you go into seminary and you want to lead others in this way, what often ends up happening is there's something you have to go and face in order to continue that journey, that closeness that is in your way, that you have to go deal with. It sucks, I'm telling you, but if you don't, it will derail both seminary and your personal life and your life. And so one of the things that seminary does, and I will say the problem is, and why I think people are afraid of it, is you knowingly have to go in there, and no matter how much success you've had in life, no matter how much anything matters in this world, everything is gone even, rock bottom, broken, rebuilding into a force that becomes this conduit for. Does it feel like you're broken? No. Does it feel like everything falls apart? Not necessarily for most humans. But for a human that hasn't dealt with something, that needs to go back and deal with this so they don't feel like they're living a sinful behavior or being a fraud or not being open about it, meaning go deal with it. We have to go be vocal about it. We have to go seek help from others. We have to go not hide it from God and try to clothe ourselves. We have to be naked in front of God with it. Like, that's what I'm talking about here. So those things, that becomes hard. We have to take a step back from seminary, deal with those things, be like, okay, I need to deal with this. For me, ideology, women as my higher power, approval from others, people pleasing, some of those things really stood strong for me as an entrepreneur.
Mm.
So before I can go help others, I really had to go deal with this pride. All it had to do with pride, the image of myself, the way I wanted to be viewed by others, where I'm putting the human's view of me higher than God's view of me. It's still
Mm.
ideology, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's part of it. We have to sort of, as we're going through seminary, it's faster or slower for some of us as we're having to deal with things in life. And sometimes it's not only an internal thing. Sometimes we're in an environment, I think, while we're starting to go through seminary, where we're in a bad situation, and
Mm-hmm.
seminary helps get clarity in that situation. Everyone's like, oh, it's probably outside the church. No, I'm talking about first, a lot of individuals, these things are going on in churches. There's leadership needing to change. There's more and more vocal generation, the generations that are below us. So seeing things that go wrong or wanting to fix things that are wrong becomes more vocal, and it's happening right now. And so those are
Mm.
some of the things that are these wavering paths at Denver Seminary. Also, you're in class now, you're physically in class, but you're also in class with people that are with you online. So there's this weird mixture of online and in person, which I hadn't experienced before. That is, I think that changes some of the dynamic of schooling in some ways. You don't have the intimacy in the classrooms that schooling has previously had. I didn't get that as much in seminary, the closeness, but I can see that part of the reason is it's a very personal journey also for everyone, because
Mm-hmm.
seminary is a very dark place, not because you're not in the light of God, but in the respect that you're in the library, you're in the Word of God, you're in the study by yourself in your head a majority of the time while you're there.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, it's a pretty solitary
yeah,
education.
and the whole thing, and I just, Tafilosky, Dr. Tafilosky, one of the most brilliant professors I've ever had in my entire life. I'm sorry, all the other professors out there that whatever. I've had very few professors that have had really huge impact on me. One was in undergraduate. I had one in undergraduate, one in graduate, and now so far one in seminary. And the transfiguration thing and the way I understood it, going to Catholic school and whatever, it was a misunderstanding on my part. Like, weirdly, a weird thing I didn't give enough understanding to. I didn't understand it enough from an every human perspective also, and what the time with God also does with us, and the same correlation. And when I started to realize that was a moment, I will tell you, where all of a sudden my jar emptied, the jar that talks about in the Bible and needing to be filled by the Holy Spirit. It was like a vacuum, and it came in such force that I was like, okay, that was a crazy weird experience, but it was an overwhelming experience in that it is what we search for as Christians. In a lot of ways, we search if we have sinful behavior, if we've done things we shouldn't have, if we've made mistakes, if we've had affair, if we've had greedy things, if we've done things, if we're not the ones who've been successful, and we've had divorces, and we have these layering of things that are just like scars that follow us everywhere. There is a salvation, and in that salvation, what is the cost? Well, publicly, I have to declare Christ as my savior because he's the one who's saving me. Okay, that seems fair, right? Oh, what else do I have to do? Well, now, because I've been given this gift of peace, I have to go give it to other people. But guess what? Not through promotion, through living a good life and attracting people to it. Okay, I can do that too. And obviously taking a lot of liberty there in what I just said. But what we're talking about is still based on love God, love your neighbor, right? And if we wanted to go into an extension, love your wife as Christ loves the church, right?
Yeah.
Those things are very powerful statements, not
Yeah.
complicated. There isn't a lot of gray area in there. There isn't any little bullet point in the Bible that says, oh, footnote, what Jesus really meant was only everyone except for your neighbor down the street.
Yeah. Yeah. The love is not restricted. It's
Yeah.
for all people everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, Justin,
Go
the
ahead.
dominant thing I'm hearing you say in
Yeah,
all of this is that a seminary education is a very unique education
very.
because it is dealing with spiritual truth, which once you learn it, simultaneously you acquire knowledge and you are confronted by it. When you learn the truth of the reality of the world and the reality of your own sin, your own problems, you cannot help but be convicted about it. And so I think you're absolutely right that a seminary journey is a very unique educational experience for anybody because it's spiritually charged and it's often emotionally charged. And because of these difficult things that you're wading into and having to sort out in your own life. For me personally, my seminary experience is that my mom, she got breast cancer when I was a senior in high school, and she was in and out of remission until finally she passed away just right before I enrolled in seminary. And what I've discovered is that so many seminary students decide to enroll and begin that educational journey in a place of brokenness or sadness or grief about something
Yeah,
because
that's where
they're
I
finding
started.
that, yeah, yeah, I know that's your story, and it's affirming this idea really. And I think that so many people do that because when you are faced with just immense challenge or immense grief, you start to ask yourself, what is true and what is important? And so many people throughout history have turned to the Bible for that. And the pinnacle of Bible study is a seminary education. So I think some people go into seminary because they see a very clear career path ahead of them where they want to be a pastor or they want to be a missionary. Some of us want to do a bit of both, like me. But others, I think, enroll in that environment because they just really want to delve so deeply into the truth and allow it to help them sort through the problems in their own life.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's part of it as well. I think that was where I was, and my path wasn't necessarily church driven as much as it was bringing it back into the entrepreneur world and spirituality in a broken world. But in
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
process, you learn that you're also broken. And in that process, I also did regeneration at Mission Hills, which deals with broken. Did I probably bite off more than I could chew, trying to just go all into God since I was between careers necessarily, and I had taken a leave of absence from the podcast, a lot of leave of absence over the 2.5 years, trying to figure out who I am and what's going on. But I will
Yeah.
tell you this. The weirdest thing that happened in seminary once I understood at first, I was like, I don't even understand what's going on here. Like, I just was like, I mean, I felt like an infant in the room, and I was probably the
Mm.
oldest person in the room most of the time. But it was like, I can't even understand what they're saying. Like, what are these words and breakdowns and acronyms and different parts of the
Yeah.
Bible? And okay, like, I'm trying to get in theological foundation ideas that a lot of people have, and I'm just like, okay, we're struggling here. But what happened about when I all of a sudden had to confront something personally that all of a sudden forced me to confront? I'm in seminary. I have no time as it is. Now I've got to go deal with something that's going to take a bunch of my time, a personal blow up in my life. But in that moment, even though seminary suffered badly in my time, there was something that happened that I can only describe as like a matrix effect. All of a sudden, you see the world, and we talk about it as truth differently. It clicked in seminary.
Mm.
The way I
Oh, like
flow
the
through it,
red pill or the blue pill.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of like all of a sudden, Neo can see the whatever it is. I think it's Neo. I don't remember what his name is,
Yeah,
but
that's right. That's the protagonist.
and he can see the numbers. He can see the matrix wall in the matrix. It's when you truly start to understand the fabric of the way we were designed and by which we were designed and by who or what, it changes the things in the way that in the German, like everyone, I'm always like, why did all these great German, like thinkers around Christianity come out of Germany. Like, why there? Why recently? Why there? But then you realize that it's not an epidemic no different than COVID can happen educationally, but can also happen spiritually when a right group of people are around the right mind of thinking and come together in a group. Not only does things happen for humanity, but things happen for God.
Mm.
And I think that that's an amazing thing. Whatever happened there was an arming of individuals that gave them the ability to really, truly think. I mean, I didn't know much about that sort of, that the Germans in that way and all of it. I understood that there was history there because I love history, but it's that type of thing. But when you really think about it, what they've done and the way they've ability to challenge our thinking and think greater, not all of them were maybe correct or not correct, depending on your opinion. But there's certain things that I've learned through Christianity that when fellowship matters, I just gave an example, like we can have evolution, renaissance within faith, staying true to the truth as much as possible, as much as we can, arguably, as imperfection as humans.
Mm-hmm.
But it can happen greater and with such greatness that it usually happens around fellowship. We talk about, the Christian Revolution in the 70s in the United States and that sort of thing, and Christian athletes and all of that came out of that era. That's sort of the same type of thing. That's a fellowship epidemic around spirituality. Mm. So that's what I think. I like this tie-in for missionary work because that's what we're trying to create, right, in missionary work, those who choose it. I also want to make a note. I talk a lot about APES tests in my podcast now and in my consulting and coaching. It came out of the class from sitting next to Arik. But I just want to tie it in because mission, let's talk about what the goals are of it. Why do it? What are you hoping to do? I think these are not personal goals. Let's take those off because entrepreneurs, we tie a lot of things to personal goals or personal achievements. And this is more of a kingdom of God achievement. God's getting the achievements. We're doing it for him. He's getting his little achievement points up there. So not really, but talk to me about this. Talk to me about dedication, purpose, reward, goals, sort of, and who weighs the success.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that the primary goal of the Christian mission is to make and mature disciples. That's the mission. The vision is the vision in Revelation, the book of Revelation, where you have people from every tongue, tribe, and nation who are now part of the kingdom of God because there were people that God sent to make and mature disciples. And so I would say that's the best way I could describe the mission and the vision. The mission agency that Leah and I, my wife, chose to serve with and be sent by and really equipped by, held accountable by, it's called Greater Europe Mission. And their mission, I guess our mission now that we've been appointed, it says to reach Europe by multiplying disciples and growing Christ's church. And the vision is God expanding his kingdom through all peoples of Europe to the world. And so one of the reasons that Leah and I went with this missions agency as opposed to many others that we could have gone with is just how it really resonates with our personal understanding of mission and vision, where the mission is to multiply disciples and grow the church, and the vision is to expand the kingdom for all peoples. And so that really resonated even before joining this agency. It was what Leah and I understand to be the mission of God and the vision of God derived directly from Scripture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's hard for people to understand because I think everyone wants to know why, who's your sponsor, what church, whatever. But the reality is something that I kind of grasped onto in the same class we had together. Is guess who our employer is? God. Sure. When we're on mission work.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Guess who we report to? God. Guess who we need to help us support the mission. The individuals in our lives and other fellow Christians need to support missionaries, because missionaries are doing work we cannot do. God gave us the ability to be thriftier with our hands or our brains and make money, but keep in mind there's still the need to give money to grow the kingdom.
Yeah,
10%
absolutely.
to the church, the tithing, etc., goes into missionary work too, and empowering those individuals that are out there doing for the kingdom what we can't do. But what we can do is provide the resources so they can do it.
Yeah.
You know, and
the reality is every Christian has the capacity to be evangelistic and outreach and share their faith with people wherever they find themselves, in their workplaces, in their neighborhoods, among their families and friend groups and social outings and things like that. Everyone has the capacity who's a Christian to share their faith. And it's actually mandatory for Christians to do that. And yet, I think what you're talking about, Justin, is that there's a select few of us who have felt led by God to go somewhere distant and foreign to us to share the gospel in a place that it is under-resourced, I would say, where there aren't enough Christians to spread the word of the good news of Jesus Christ. And so everyone's a missionary in some way in their own capacity, but we often use that word to describe people that are paid to do it vocationally or do it internationally in whatever capacity.
Yeah, I think, and there's different types of missionary work, right? There's schools, there's orphanages, there's churches, there's building churches. I mean, so the missionary work takes on a lot of different forms, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And so let's talk about how do you choose a path? How did you choose a path, and how did you choose your path?
Yeah. I was just going to say that's what's cool about a missions agency is that our missions agency has about 700 missionaries worldwide, particularly in Europe, but there's also sending countries where there's staff in country. Like there's Greater Europe Mission missionaries here in the United States and in Colorado and in Canada. So that's why I say worldwide, even though it's focused on a specific continent. I'm sorry, what did you say just prior? I lost my train of thought.
It's okay. I'm sort of just how you addressed it. Like, how do you choose your missionary path? Like, how do you choose country? How do you choose path? You talked about you choose Europe. You chose Romania. You chose
Hungary. Yep,
Hungary. Sorry, Hungary. Hungary. And gosh, for some reason, I always do that with Bucharest and Budapest. And
yeah. I mean, they sound similar.
Yeah, I don't know why, but
and they're very close together too.
So my bad. But Hungary, like how you ended up choosing that, you've chosen. Like, talk to us more about the thought process as an individual, because you're talking about literally uprooting your family, and you just had a new baby back in December. Like, these aren't easy choices. I don't think most people would uproot their family for a job anymore, let alone for a spiritual mission. So let's really talk about this, because it's not an easy decision to pick up your entire family and put them somewhere and do this. And there's no instant gratification on this one.
Yep.
So
that's an excellent question, Justin. Yeah. So, I mean, compounding, not only do we have 2 young girls who are 3 and just born, but our whole family lives in Denver on both sides, like just about everybody. And so it really is a big undertaking for us to move our little immediate family away from all our extended family where we have support and help here in Denver. Really, what motivates that is feeling called by God and wanting to serve God and love him. And, that should be our primary motivation, and it usually is. But there's secondary motivations for Leah and I, to be totally honest. Both of us love international travel, and we love getting to experience new cultures and new places, the architecture, the natural scenery. And I've gotten to spend some time in Western Europe and a lot of time in Central Africa and a lot of time in Central America. but I've never even been to Eastern Europe. And so one of our side motivations is we just love to get to know the people there and the environment. But of course, the primary thing is we have felt God calling us to go do this and to do it even though it's going to be hard. And what that looked like for us is on our first anniversary, which was a few years ago now, we were talking and praying and felt God prompting us to serve in international ministry because we felt that there aren't that many people who are willing and capable of doing that, but we were more inclined towards it than the average person. And so we were feeling like it's a very real possibility God's going to call us to do that. And then while I've been enrolled in seminary at a half-time status and being an associate pastor full-time, throughout the last 6 years, Leah and I have been following missions agencies on social media and just trying to discern, God, where specifically are you calling us to go and serve? Because we don't have any affinity for any country specifically, but we're feeling drawn towards Europe and we don't know where specifically. So once we were appointed as missionaries with Greater Europe Mission, we were asked by the leadership to consider serving in Budapest. And Leah's actually been there. And Justin, I think you said you've been there at least once. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I have never been there.
It's
Believe it or
Eastern
not.
Europe's the most beautiful place. I mean,
yeah,
just incredible.
Yeah, I hear it's just
Sofia, Bulgaria, like all that area, like Prague. It's an amazing place. Untouched. That's the crazy part, is it sort of was protected from World War II because the Germans went north, and then it fell safe because the Russians basically protected it under the Iron Curtain. It just, and you know, there are parts that were war-written, torn into very small pieces, beautiful places in Eastern Europe that's not the case. War tore apart them more recently in the 90s as they got independence and then went to war with each other. Civil wars, Yugoslavia, countries like that, Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
Some of them broke up peacefully, some did not.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world, untouched in a way that is unimaginable. The food is good. The humans are good. There's a vast amount of opportunity there. And I don't know, like, it's one of those places in the world that's sort of home feeling. Like you could live there and figure it out for sure.
Yeah.
Does it have its problems? Of course, everywhere does. I want to hit on something you just said. Okay.
Sure.
Genesis 2:24. I'm going to read in the ESV versions because that's what I have in front of me right now. Because I try to use different versions. That's also what seminary taught me. Read different versions of the Bible, but always read the Bible. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Okay. We can say the same, Matthew 19:5. And said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. He repeats basically what's in Genesis there, Matthew does. And so I think about that, you know, because that's kind of what you're doing. You have your family here, you have your roots here. Now you and your wife are leaving, you're becoming one, your family is becoming one unit, and you are going and relying on God as your father to go out in the world and do what you need to do. You're completing the triangle. I talked about this in the podcast maybe earlier, but in any relationship, particularly our marriages, God needs to be in there. If we have good friendships, we have good mentors, God exists in those as well. But from our relationship standpoint, I think it is important. I think those verses right there really clarify that. And it's in Ephesians 5:31 as well. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. It's repeated over and over again. And so I don't think it's so important. Not only was it in Genesis in the Old Testament, but then it's repeated by Paul and Matthew, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So That's part of and where your confidence come from in the unknown. If people are like, oh, yes, he's never done it before. How is this guy so confident? It's because God is there. The Holy Spirit is there. When you walk
Yeah.
that way, it doesn't matter. The trust is there. The faith is there. And sometimes there's dark paths along the way, but they're meant to teach us things that will be a part of the next transition in our life, which is always to grow God's kingdom and better the humans' lives around us. We are always being equipped. Whatever's growing us is for us to grow others.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Last question for you, Arik. I'm definitely going to have you back on because I have some other things for you. This will be my last question about mission. And then I have one last question before we get off. So technically two.
Mm-hmm.
What specifically on your mission, where are you working? How do you begin your task, and how do you because I think everyone's like, yeah, I'd love to go on mission. What do I do once I get there? How do you get started? What happens once you have boots on the ground?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll answer both halves of that. So first, what we're planning on doing once we actually arrive in Budapest is going to be campus ministry, either at a K through 12 international Christian school or at one of the about 30 universities in downtown Budapest doing university campus ministry as kind of an itinerant minister, doing outreach and forming Christian fellowship and things like that. And so what we've learned is that many missionaries have a vague idea of what they're going to do when they arrive in country, but you have to be really willing to be flexible because opportunities rise and fall, and you don't know exactly what it's going to look like until you actually arrive. And a challenge for us in that has been, how do the people supporting us in prayer and financially, we have to cast vision for them of what we want to do, while also giving them the caveat of, we don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we believe God has equipped us for whatever it's going to be once we actually arrive. So that's answering the first half of your question. The second half of what does that timeline look like and how do we prepare? For us, it was first discerning to the best of our ability God's will, calling us to go serve internationally. The next step was picking a missions agency, which we've done, and applying and doing interviews and doing a discernment retreat with the leaders of that agency, and then ultimately being appointed. The next step was another 4-day retreat where we learned how to support raise, which there were all kinds of things that seminary never taught me about how to raise financial support to be a missionary. Unless you've taken a class. I haven't, Justin. I don't know.
Raising money is never easy, period, I don't think, let alone.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Let alone when it's a donation of of the magnitude that it takes to do God's work. So
that's right. Yeah.
Go on.
So the next step is we're in the phase of meeting with churches, meeting with individuals and couples and families, and asking that for them to support us long term on a monthly basis financially. And that has a lot of great things, a lot of challenging things. But the way that that's going to end is this spring we'll do a month-long intercultural training here in Monument, where we will learn how to adapt to a new culture, and we'll learn a lot of skills for absorbing and learning a new language. And then finally, at the beginning of this coming summer, we will move abroad and have a couple months to just learn as much as we can about where to get furniture and groceries and survive. And then we'll actually start whatever the specific ministry is that we're going to do. We'll start that when the semester starts this coming fall. That's kind of our timeline. But yeah, it's not a quick transition to be a missionary. That there's, at least the route we're going, there's a lot of steps to go that route.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but I think that it's a preparation thing. They don't want people to get there and then get homesick or change their mind then come back. It's a big investment.
Yeah.
And it's not like back in the day where once you're on the ship sailing, you're stuck on the ship for 200 days and you're going there no matter what.
Yeah, missions is a lot more accessible than it was decades ago. And I think it's a lot more sustainable, where families can actually not just tolerate being missionaries, but actually thrive and love it. And our expectation is if our giftings and our skills, if they truly are going to meet the needs of the city that we're going to in such a beautiful way, and it's like you said, it's a beautiful place, it's an enjoyable place. Our expectation is, wow, we could do this for the rest of our career. It seems like it's sustainable for families, and we're really excited about that.
Yeah, I think that what you're going to find is probably, and what we just talked about a little bit, is the abundance of life is where we are in a way, but it's also where we are in God's kingdom. And when we transcend that onto earth, the ability to live, it's that matrix effect I'm talking about, the ability to live in peace, which God does say he will give us, the ability to live in peace. It doesn't mean there isn't suffering here and there and life doesn't still happen. As I just saw a thing on Instagram, the Cookie Monster saying that's the way the cookie crumbles. Yeah, it does. Life does not always go your way. That's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
And so,
well, it's with Christ. With Christ, contentment is possible in any circumstance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the ability to see life in a better way, react in a better way, because you see things differently. And I talked about this in the podcast before this, but the individual who's on there, his name was Peter, talks about, I don't want to be thinking about the dot of my existence right now in God's kingdom. I want to think about the dot and the line that's impacted after the dot for however long, because of my impact and influence of what I did in this world as I bring God's kingdom more here. That's part of the goal, is not only do we live by it, but it's our wanting to make sure that we can have as much peace and goodness in this world as possible, to be as close to that now before we get to it in our next afterlife, in our presence with God, in our heaven. And so, but I think that's some of it. I think that the ability to do that's a big deal, and look through it, as you said. What are your favorite verses? Do you have like 1, 2, or 3 verses that are sort of your staples? Have they changed over time? How do you sort of look at things like that? And people talk a lot about those in the world right now. Go ahead.
Yeah. This is kind of unconventional, but my specialty in seminary was actually biblical Hebrew. And I was good enough at biblical Hebrew that I was the group tutor for 9 courses. And so I would say my favorite passage is probably actually the Shema. I don't know. Did you ever take any Hebrew courses, Justin, at the seminary?
Not yet. I dropped it when I was going to take it over summer school. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll get there eventually, but
I'm
the
scared.
Shema
Thank God you're my friend.
Yeah. Well, I since I haven't been tutoring, I've lost a lot of it. But yeah, the Shema is Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. And I've had the privilege of not only learning it in Hebrew and memorizing it in Hebrew, and I can still recite it, but I've gotten to just study it extensively and learn more about it. And so it's the English translation goes, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." And it actually has this connotation of, some people think it's a monotheistic thought, where it says the Lord is one. Well, that's because he's one God. But I had a professor that very convincingly told me that it seems like it is actually indicating that the Lord is one with us. So I think that's really cool. But is there anything you want me to say about that passage specifically, Justin, or you're just asking kind of?
No, I'm just asking, but I do love that passage, actually, if you wanted to talk about it real quick, since it is something you spend time with.
Yeah.
Because I think what you just said is a very strong and valid point, and I have heard the same thing since being in seminary, but or something similar. I wouldn't say exactly the same, but anyway, go on.
Sure.
Let's break it down a little bit more, because I do like the passage.
Great. Well, yeah, I won't do all 6 verses because I know we're wrapping up here,
Yeah.
but just if I were to just quickly recite from memory the first 2 verses in Hebrew and then exegete it a little bit more, it's Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Ve'achavta et Adonai Elohecha, Bechol levavecha, ubechol nafshecha, ubechol meodecha. And so that's, hear Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. And the typical translation, like the NIV would say, and with all your soul and with all your strength. But the words, levavecha, nafshecha, meodecha, those 3 words, it really means with all your heart and with all your physical body. And the best translation that I've come across for the 3rd word is actually all your exceedingliness. It's like love God with everything you have, your emotions, your body, and just everything you have. And so that's one of the questions you asked me to consider prior to this podcast was, what motivates you to do what you're doing and to go into missions? And it's not always the case, but what I want to be the case is that it is because I am loving God with everything that I'm doing. I'm loving God with my heart, my body, and everything I have, my finances, my time, where my family lives, how we raise our kids. That's really what I want to be my motivation. And really, I cannot manifest that by myself. It is going to have to be Christ, who is immensely better than me in a moral sense, in a spiritual sense. He has to be sanctifying me and working that into me so that I have the correct motivation for doing what we want to do.
I love it. I kind of lied a little bit, so probably not to confess it. I said 2 more questions, but I do now have one more just because of what we just talked about. And I want to just quick.
Go for it. Yeah.
You were in business before. That's where you got your degree at Denver University. You were, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just affirming. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I had it correct. And then you went from business into seminary. And obviously most of my audience and in my things before I went to seminary and have started that journey has been in the secular world and the entrepreneur business world. For the entrepreneur business person, how do someone that was there before and now taking a different journey, how do we as businessmen and entrepreneurs better bridge the gap between our businesses, us, our families, whatever it looks like, and God, like starting right now? If you were to say, I recommend that you guys do with my education and what I've learned. I don't have all the answers, but this is what I think is the best course of action for you. What would you say?
Yeah, that is an awesome question. And I think I would go right back to Genesis. I mean, you brought us to Genesis at one point. And what the Bible says near the very beginning is that the Lord placed the man and the woman into the garden to work it and care for it. And so the Christian worldview says that work, and as an extension, business, was created by God so that we can exercise our God-given right to rule over the creation and care for it and ultimately glorify Him. And so I think the biggest thing that bridges the gap between faith and work, or between Christianity and business, whatever synonyms you want to use, is the fact that God actually designed work even before the fall and before sin. Work is just an inherently good thing. I don't remember which theologian said this, so you can cut this out of the recording if you want, Justin, but it was something about how God placed us on this planet for our enjoyment and for His glory. And so that we can satisfy our curiosity by just exploring the world He made and learning how it all works and better utilizing it. And so I think the bridge between faith and work is that God created it and made it good. And so in some ways, work is a very Christian concept. And I think people in the business world start to become more inclined towards Christianity when they realize how affirmative Christianity is of work and business.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I wasn't thinking of attaching it in that way, nor are you were going to answer it that way, but I would 100% love the way that direction of that went. And I agree. The work is key. Creating work for others is also key. So creating jobs where others can work and glorify God is key also. That is very important.
Dignity.
Exactly. And the ability to support their family, the ability for a father to be a provider and a protector. All these things, we start stacking these things in here. And so these are very important aspects that are very Christian foundations that, as long as we stay within our values and we live a Christian life, none of us are perfect. We're going to sin. We're going to make mistakes. The key is to repent, redeem, and, change our behavior as quickly as possible and walk with God as quickly as possible and, make amends as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And so
the next step after realizing that work is a Christian idea, a biblical idea, is then integrating more biblical concepts into your business. Because Jesus talked about money more than just about anything else. And so you recognize that business is a Christian idea, a biblical idea, and then you integrate more biblical concepts and ethics into everything that you do within your business and how you operate as a leader.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we lack that a lot. I think we don't realize that there's an easy way to not hide behind our Christianity or not be Christians in the world, and we're like, well, we don't want to go boasting about it. That's going to scare people. And I'm not going to go there and be on a bullhorn. Well, there's two differences. I can scream it from the mountaintops by just climbing the mountain.
Yeah.
And even if I scream at the mountaintop, no one's going to hear me. But if people know I climbed the mountaintop, that scream's going to last forever. That's the thing we're talking about.
Yeah. The best proclamation is demonstration. You show people how Christ has transformed your life, and they're so much more inclined to listen to anything you have to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So if the audience wants to support you, they want to support your mission, they want to help you out, how do they find you? How do they support it? How do they, I don't want to use the word donate, contribute, do God's work, do what God's calling them to do, and support mission work? How do they do that?
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking, Justin. I'd say if anyone is intrigued by me and Leah wanting to go and serve in campus ministry in Budapest, and it's one of the most unreached places in the world. Europe is actually right now 3% evangelical, which is the lowest continent in the world. And so if people are intrigued by that and want to support us, I'd love to talk to them about it. And so my email is just arik.stewart, Stewart, @gemission.org. And so if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'd be happy to share more about what we're doing. And if they're wanting to support us in what we're doing, because like I said, we're having to raise financial support to do this. They could go to gemission.org/give/42219, and that would take them to our family support page.
Yeah, will you repeat that one more time, the last part?
Yeah, for sure.
And then definitely send me the link in a chat so I can put it in the episode notes, but repeat it for the audience, please, again.
Oh, wonderful. Yep. Yeah, so it's gemission.org/give/42219. And you'll see a picture of me and Leah and Selah when she was about 1.5. We need to get a new family picture up there now that we have another daughter named Arya who was just born. So we'll do that. We'll do that sometime soon.
Yeah, I love it. I appreciate your time, Arik, and I look forward to it. You and I have lunch on Friday, so definitely looking forward to that at Big Apple Bodega. I'll be recording at Big Apple Bodega for the podcast, and then you and I have lunch, so that'll be pretty cool. Oh, looking forward to that. So
same here.
Thank you again, and you're a pretty cool dude. I'm glad we sat next to each other in class, talk about God working for us in crazy ways.
For sure. Yeah.
The whole reason, season, or lifetime thing. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your friendship. And I just want the audience to know fellowship is the real deal. It gets us out of really dark situations. We just have to go seek it, and we have to seek it in an environment where God exists and grows in relationship with us. So I apologize, guys. It's my 5th podcast today. I'm losing my voice a little bit, but Arik, thank you again. Everyone in the audience, I love you guys. Thank you for your support. I appreciate all of it. I wouldn't have launched another season or had the confidence to do another season or wanted to if all of you guys hadn't reached out and started asking about it, and the entrepreneurs wanting me to do more interviews or people reaching out and wanting to be on the show. I appreciate you guys. It gave me purpose. And then there's God. Of course, he deserves all the credit because I was avoiding it. And in a way, going to seminary was also me hiding from what God was calling me to do in some ways, which was use my voice, use my audience, use my skill set to go spread his word in the gifts and the things that he had given me in the abundance he had already given me. So I had looked at it as seminary was going to be my solution. What seminary is it's an equipping to further do what he already did. That's important for everyone to understand in their own purpose, in their own mission, in their own midlife crisis, in their own losing of their identities. It's not what we think. He's not just washing us clean when he empties us. It doesn't mean empty our skills, empty our knowledge, empty our experience, bad or good. We need all of it. He's just, we're emptying all of the things that make us rebel against God. Speaking of rebellion, and allowing our jar to be empty so it can be filled with the Holy Spirit and his wisdom. And our wisdom increases the more we spend time in the Bible and in his word and with him. So I think that that's what we're talking about here from my perspective. Am I going to continue it? Yes, I think it's an important equipping that God has asked me to do. I went so far into it trying to be obedient and being so servitude that I missed that he had also given me other things that I need to use along the way at the same time. Same for you, I think. I think your business skills and your business degrees and your entrepreneurial skills, you sitting next to me, your leadership skills, that there's a greater good here. And, Europe does need to be turned around. So I'm interested to see what God's purpose for you is on a greater scale. Not to boost your ego, but to boost God's kingdom. So,
yeah. Thank you, Justin.
You're very welcome. All right. Anyone who's out there who wants to be on the show, there's a link in the show notes. Click on the calendar. You can sign up to be on the show if you're an entrepreneur or a food entrepreneur. There is a link there. I can give you prep questions. I can help you with other episodes, things like that. If you need reference points or you want to hear certain things or reference people that are in similar industries, you just ask. Please, we do answer. We are pretty good at answering Instagram and social media and things like that, and emails that come into my personal email. I consolidated everything into one email. I'm tired of having multiple business email addresses and everything like that. Justin Bizarro at Gmail. It's free. I don't have to waste money. I can put the money back into the companies or give it to employees or however that works in the long run. But just being smarter. Again, a lot of that financial stuff, there's a lot of financial stuff in the Bible of how we are to live as Christians, and living in that way and giving in that way, there is a crazy amount of abundance our life has. I don't even know how to explain it. It's not material. Though, are we safe materially? Yes. I would say yes. God gives us that in the ways that he needs to. But, it's just teaching us that God makes us safe, not any material thing, really.
Yeah.
So, thank you guys again, and we're out.